Hey everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Two Pages podcast. I'm your host, Skeletroy Blockbuster, and with me, of course, we have another cavalcade of great writers here. And we're all going to share some holiday stories. Not specifically Christmas, not specifically not Christmas. I don't know. I don't know what anybody else's stories are yet.
I know what mine is.
Oh, quiet you.
And he's going to tell it right now. Go ahead, Chris.
Nothing.
The end. Good story.
Yay!
So now, joining us from last time, of course, we have Thomas Fireheart and Grant Beard. And Grant's got a story this time.
Amazingly.
So, Grant and Chris are kind of switching roles.
Yes.
And we have newcomer Debbie to the podcast.
Say hi, everybody.
So, I don't really have a good segue or anything. Any of you guys have any, like, Christmas or holiday traditions or anything before we get started? Anything you do with your families or anything like that?
Get really drunk and fight about things that happened 2 years ago.
I like the first part of that. Maybe not the second part, but the first part.
I like this part, but I don't like ow.
Well, hopefully it doesn't actually, like, evolve into a fist fight.
No, but the cats have gotten violent before.
For Christmas, I got bruises.
Everyone gets a
No.
torch in their pocket.
Now, hang on a second here, Troy. You said that you and Debbie used to work together, so that means she lives in Canada, right? Are you telling me that there are violent Canadians? Is that what I'm getting here?
Oh my god.
Hockey is
or not,
Canadian,
they
Grant,
always-
and hockey is, like, the most violent sport there is.
That's a
All
good
right,
one.
touche. You got me there.
What about the Bulls thing?
I always thought it was rugby.
Still more violent than the Bulls. Okay.
Between the two of them, I'll go with that.
Well, I mean, you gotta think, like, I don't really see that as, like, it's just a spin on running. You know, like, you could put bulls anywhere and it would be dangerous. They're just kind of running.
What did we start? Okay,
Yeah,
what did I
that's
start?
probably not a bad idea. We're already getting off the rails and we're like 2 minutes in.
Because that never happens with any podcast we do, Troy. Ever.
No.
Yeah,
No,
you know.
I generally keep, I run a pretty tight ship around here, I must say.
Definitely, yeah.
Captain Skeletroy.
Where's Jimmy when I need him?
Well, he was ready to do a podcast, just not this one.
I was gonna say, he was like,
Tune into the
"Podcast
Isometric
tonight?"
Perspective next Sunday for our season finale.
And there it is.
And with all that out of the way, yeah, it's time to get to the first story, I think. So tonight we're going to start off with Tom. Do you have any sort of intro or lead into the story? Go ahead. If not, start up the story.
I must say, I don't know why, but I've just been so distracted lately that I didn't end up writing a new one, so I'm pretty much just cheating and reading one that I wrote like 2 years ago. Which is the third part in like a 3-part thing that I'm pretty sure at least Troy knows about, which is like this sort of epic adventures thing. I think I mentioned it after the last one. So yeah, Keith and Gary's epic Christmas adventure. Okay. Keith and Gary were having a quiet night in on Christmas Eve. Their friends would be coming around the next day to celebrate the holiday, and so all the presents they'd bought for each other and each of their friends were already under the tree. After Keith had been forced to sit through a miracle on 34th Street, the pair decided they should finally go to bed so they could be up early enough to finish setting up for the party. About a half hour later, when they were finally slipping into bed, they both heard what sounded like a window being broken. Both men reached under the bed, Gary pulling out a baseball bat and Keith pulling out a shotgun, which caught Gary off guard and seemed to make him feel insecure. As such, Keith gave in and they switched weapons before heading out to the lounge room. When they got there, they saw a man stuffing all their presents into a bag. Gary got the man's attention by pumping the shotgun, and Keith and Gary locked eyes with the man. There was total silence. The robber had a look of pure fear in his eyes. Suddenly, Gary pulled the trigger without thinking and randomly shot the nearby robber. Shot near the robber, sorry. In the ensuing panic, the robber jumped out through the broken window and ran down to his car, where someone was waiting in the driver's seat. Having finally calmed down, Keith grabbed a bag full of weapons and met Gary at their car out the front of the house. The robbers hadn't left yet, as they'd been having trouble getting the car to start up again, so the robber they'd seen was having a shootout with Gary. Finally, the driver got the car started, almost driving away without his accomplice, before stopping to let him get in, with Keith and Gary not too far behind in their own car. The two cars sped down relatively empty streets in the suburbs, shooting at each other occasionally, but never managing to hit each other's cars somehow. After a while, they finally got into the center of town, where they had to start weaving through traffic and occasionally going onto the sidewalk to avoid stopping, with the robbers almost mowing down a few people. Not too long after they'd been in town, a few police cars started following them. The police weren't a problem at all, though, as in response to this, one of the robbers pulled out a rocket launcher and, when the police cars were forced to bunch in together, fired a rocket into them, with Gary swerving out of the way to avoid getting caught in the explosion. This seemed to be the opening the robbers needed, as when Gary and Keith tried to find them again, the robbers had seemingly disappeared. The pair continued to drive around in search of the robbers, keeping a low profile so the cops wouldn't pay any attention to them. After several hours, the pair almost giving up, Gary finally spotted the robbers' car outside a warehouse. They armed themselves with the weapons Keith had brought and made their way into the warehouse. They managed to remain undetected on their way in and hid behind some crates. Peering over the crates, they noticed the robbers giving the presents to an obese white man who happened to be dressed as Santa. Gary unfortunately let out a gasp, giving them away and causing them to be dragged out of their hiding place and thrown down in front of the man dressed as Santa, who was sitting in an expensive-looking chair on a raised platform. Upon closer inspection, Gary and Keith realized this man was someone called Chris Nicholas, who had recently escaped from an institute for the criminally insane. They knew as he'd only recently escaped and it had been reported on the news. Chris thought himself to be Santa Claus and thus was known for killing people he deemed to be naughty and having an odd obsession with stealing and hoarding presents, some of which his gang would sell on the streets. As the gang was discussing what to do with the two, Keith pulled out a pistol he had on him and shot one of the men near him in the throat. In the short panic of the situation, Gary then let off a smoke bomb, with both men running back into hiding as the gang members shot in all directions. Chris called for them to stop wasting their bullets, but by the time the smoke had cleared, only a few men survived, most having been killed by each other in the crossfire. Enraged, Chris ordered the only men left to scour the room, as they couldn't have gotten too far. In the maze of crates, Keith and Gary managed to pick off the remaining gang members one by one, with the last one being shot by both Keith and Gary as he ran back out to where Chris was. Keith and Gary went to shoot Chris as well, but realized they were now out of bullets, to which Chris laughed maniacally. Chris then pulled out two canes that had been painted to look like candy canes, flinging both to either side of him to reveal that they were actually concealed blades. In response, Gary pulled out the katana he'd had on his back, and Keith pulled out his twin wakizashi. To their surprise, Chris turned out to be quite agile, rushing the two and almost catching them off guard, splashing away and forcing them to do nothing but dodge and block his attacks. After a while, Gary was finally able to knock one of the blades out of Chris's left hand, cutting off the top half of his left hand off in the process, giving himself and Keith the chance they needed. The two were now dominating the fight and beating Chris into submission. In a last-ditch effort, Chris managed to use most of his remaining strength to knock both men back in different directions. When Keith started to get back up, Chris moved slowly towards him, picking up one of his blades back up along the way. Out of desperation, Keith threw one of his wakizashi at Chris, which Chris managed to deflect. However, Keith threw his other wakizashi immediately after this, catching Chris in the chest with it. Chris seemed surprised, but relatively undeterred by this, and kept walking towards him. Keith curled up and waited for the worst to happen when he suddenly couldn't hear Chris's footsteps anymore. He looked up to find that Chris now had a katana poking out through his throat. It turns out that Gary had recovered and thrown his katana like a spear at Chris from behind, and it was going right through his neck, with it going right through his neck. Chris finally collapsed to his knees and then slowly slid down on both Gary's katana and one of Keith's wakizashi, rolling to his side after hitting the hilt of the katana. Gary and Keith grabbed all their weapons and slowly headed back out to their car, almost being blinded as the sun was now coming up. After putting back all their weapons back, a squad of police cars showed up. After inspecting the place and questioning Gary and Keith, they let them go as a reward for taking out the gang and Chris. They were also offered the bounty that had been put on Chris's head that they weren't aware of, but refused and just asked to be able to take back the presents his goons had stolen from them. The police obliged and the two headed home. On the drive back, Gary rested his head on Keith's lap. After checking his watch when they stopped at some traffic lights, Keith realized that it was Christmas Day, and had been for hours. "Merry Christmas, Gary," he said, whilst patting Gary on the head a few times. Gary was too tired to respond properly at first, so his initial response was very quiet and mumbled, which Keith didn't mind. A short while later, Gary chimed in with, "Our friends better bloody love what we've got for them after that." The couple started chuckling before bursting out in tearful laughter, almost making Keith miss a green light. Oops. And that's it. Unfortunately, I forgot that I had a character named Chris in that.
It's okay. He was a homicidal gang leader.
We all figured that Chris was, but that just tears it. I mean, we all know now.
So, Tom, one thing about your story that I have to ask, I might have missed this. Where'd they get the swords from?
They
Did
just
they
had
have
them.
them all along?
Like that, yeah, I kind of...
So, why was the one guy carrying a baseball bat?
I don't know, like, the entire point of these...
Let's play baseball in here.
Basically, yeah, it's basically... It's basically
Hey, we
kind of
both have
making-
swords,
yeah.
but I need that shotgun because I don't feel safe.
Well, that's like initially, like they grab the other weapons later. But generally, the idea is making fun of sort of revenge fantasy. Because like the first one of these was Gary's epic sandwich adventure, where he just fights a bunch of ninjas over a sandwich, and which came from a joke that I'd made for a parody of Peaches by the Presidency of the United States of America. And I just decided, well, I'm shitty at writing song lyrics, so I'll just turn it into a story. And then I ended up doing two more. One was the Valentine's Day one, and then the Christmas one that I just read out.
Well, you never know. You might get the chance to read that Valentine's Day one in a couple months.
And he was throwing a katana like a spear. That must be a strong brother.
Kind of accurate to do that too. Oh goodness. That's
Yeah, like the idea is that it's supposed to be like not really make any sense.
Oh yeah, no, I get it. That's awesome.
Well, no, I just wasn't sure if I'd missed a line. Because, I mean, they could have easily had them stored in the trunk of the car, right? Because, like, after the battle was over, they were putting the weapons back into the safety compartment of the car, I would assume.
Yeah, like I think I wrote that in like one sitting, so I probably didn't think it through all that well. But yeah, I'm pretty sure all three of these I just wrote in like one sitting. Took like an hour to write, probably.
Either way, I dug it. I just
Yeah.
had some questions.
Yeah.
All right, so that's one story down, 3 to go. Up next, we have Grant.
Hello. So I want to preface this by saying that I was trying to redeem myself as best I could for the last time. Because I didn't have a story, and I did feel bad about that.
You're
And
not forgiven.
whatever. Thanks, Chris. I know you hate me anyway. Anyway, the biggest thing though that really kind of came to this, I've been busy with work. I think that's an understatement. I've been doing about 60 to 70 hour weeks right now, so things have been fun to even think to get something in. So I know this is going to feel slightly rushed because I know I just ended up typing like the last page of it in like the last 45 minutes. So things have definitely felt rushed. So forgive me in advance. It's also going to sound very familiar very quickly, as if you guys are not familiar with this story, then I don't know how many Christmases you've gotten through that you haven't heard this kind of story.
Is it the Grinch?
No, no, but that is a good one. I'll have to keep that in mind for next year. Though James kind of beat me to that. James Rolfe kind of beat me to that one, so no, we'll leave that go. Anyway, he headed to his bedroom. Humbug! I'll show them. I can still be merry and cheerful. The lights went out. The wind picked up. Before he could second-guess himself, out of the walls themselves appeared his old favorites, Mario and Luigi, transparent and pissed off. Merry and cheerful? Mamma mia! You're joking, right? Said Mario. More like selfish and depressed, the taller green-clad brother said. You aren't real. You can't be real. You're a fictional character, screamed John. He did not believe his eyes. This is what you get for eating those spicy meatballs tonight. You should have listened to your girlfriend, but no, said Mario, standing only up to John's chest. You have to do the same thing you've always done. Well, guess what, bastardi? Time you paid your 2 gold coins. Luigi, who stood the same size as John, if not a bit taller, the beret helped, stood in front of him suddenly. Tonight you will be visited by 3 spirits, 3 who will let you know how much of a prick you've been to those around you. He flicked John in the nose, and falling onto his ass, John looked up at the 2 of them, amazed that they were both still in front of him. And trust me, you think Luigi's mansion was scary? Wait till you get a load of these 3.
Oh, jeez.
The next moment, they were both gone. John got up in a huff, looked round for a sign of them, and then shook his head. Just the meatballs. I'm just in some pre-sleep daze. It was late, coming close to 12 a.m. the next morning. Christmas morning. He walked into his room, jacket still on, as he settled in for the night. Turning on his PlayStation 4, he went to fire up Destiny. Before he could...
Is that art imitating life?
Before he could select his character in the typical slow-loading process that Destiny has, John was in a headlock. Kept you waiting, huh? Then again, I wouldn't expect you to have seen the box at the foot of your bed. You're getting sloppy playing these shooters all the time, kid. The gruff voice that was behind him had John's life in his hands. Still, he was motionless in his speech, holding John methodically to set a point. Maybe instead of letting your brain go to mush, you should start figuring out your enemies again, like you used to. With that, the chokehold was gone, and suddenly, darkness. Save for one little peephole shaped like a grab handle on a cardboard box. John stayed silent, especially as the images started to go by him in a flurry of fast-paced motion. He saw Christmas passed, days passed, friends passed. Then the darkness faded, and he could see the entire scene. His old house, his old friends and family. This was Christmas of 1986. He was 7 years old and had just opened up his new Nintendo Entertainment System. Quickly unboxing the system and setting it up, he had that all-too-familiar cartridge in his hand of Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, included with one of those old gray and white zapper light guns. John was getting over the feeling of what was happening to him, settling into the fact that somehow he had gone backwards. The figure, who was still behind him, hoisted him to his feet, slapped him in the back of the head, and stood to John's side. You still don't get it, do you? Solid Snake stood next to him, looked at him with his typical stern face, shaking his head slowly. This was you, happy as anything to open that old familiar box. Now, we're lucky to get a smile out of you for something as... Sorry, 1 second. Now we're lucky to get a smile out of you for something as high-tech as you have now. Snake pointed, looking in the direction of his friends that surrounded John. And then, happy as anything to be around you. With a backhand to the nose, John held his face with a yelp. Suddenly, it was 9 years later. Or how about here, your first PlayStation? Your friends huddled over you, happy to see you get one and to be one of the first set of kids to play with it. John was still catching himself from the hit to the nose, blinking to try to take it all in. He looked at Snake, dumbfounded, trying to assess what was going on in front of him. Snake paused for a moment and looked at him. All of this from the people you've pushed away. All of this from those who may have left. And how much technology do you have to keep in touch with them? Codec is nothing to what you have in your hand. John looked down a bit at his pocket, and from it he had a cell phone. The light from the screen lit up in his face, and a text notification that said, "Hey, call me." It was his old friend Tim from a few years ago. Tim had gone to college far away from John, and it was hard for the two of them to get together, nearly impossible. After a few moments of looking, his eyes welled up, ready to cry for some odd reason. Before he could, however, he looked up to see the past, his past, was gone. Snake was no longer to be found. No box in the corner or anything for that matter. He looked back down at his phone after realizing he was back in his room and his home. Then heard a very quick, low movement, and the light in his hand was replaced with one hovering over his phone. The ghost looked up at John with an off-center look, then spoke. "You really do spend way too much time trying to save the galaxy, I hope you know." A small orb of light flashed its metal frame, looking up at him before scanning him over. He knew this object as the small companion in destiny, always guiding him from place to place without stopping to enjoy the scenery. But why would it be here now? What are you doing? Not some fallen or darkness. John questioned the actions of the ghost before out of the shadows stepped its owner, the stranger, stealth hunter that followed him everywhere in Destiny. Oh, great, another poorly developed character. Have some terribly vague monologue for me again? Just this, the stranger spoke. You are more dark than you think, and you need to understand who is important in your life. She grabbed hold of the ghost, and suddenly it disappeared. You've been fooling yourself for far too long, John. There are many important aspects and people in your life. You have to wake up. In a flash of blue light, he saw back to the night, the bar, full of friends that he had just said goodnight to, ones that he had since first NES, his first PlayStation. Before he could catch himself and wake up from the flashback to the night, he fell over again, onto his rear, then flat on his back. He felt the cold sting of a short blade pierce his neck, and his vision went hazy. Requiescat in pace. When John opened his eyes again, he stood in what could only be described as a lab. Around him was ruin. Next to him, a dark-hooded figure. It helped him to his feet before sliding into the shadows. He knew him. Ezio Auditore from Assassin's Creed. John moved through the lab and suddenly could understand what was happening. He saw someone crumpled over a pile of papers and notes. As he approached the body, rolled off of the chair that it was on. John gasped and stumbled backwards a bit, falling into a canister with a hatch on it. I would recommend to never do this on your phone ever again. He stopped the hatch from closing on top of him, but only just. His breathing was far from steady, and his eyes moved wildly as he looked around. In each canister was a figure. Each of them looked like one of his friends. And the body on the ground? His own. John quickly looked over looked over and inspected the papers and documents on the table before coming to the realization this was his work. John picked up a letter that he read over parts of. These are my final days, not able to finish my work. Wish I had my friends to help. Tim would have solved this problem. John stood silent, reading through a few more letters, a few more papers of notice. He looked around trying to find Ezio or any sign that someone else was there with him. He did feel alone in the dark, drafty lab. Suddenly, Ezio scooped him up by his neck and shoved him into the canister, closing the hatch on him. He remained silent, smirking at John under his hood, his eyes unseen before the last moments. You could do so much good with others around you. With that, John felt a flash of ice cold before he woke up again in his room. His vision was hazy, but he looked around his room before seeing the light outside shining off the snow that had fallen the night before. His TV still sitting at the login screen. He had chills as he looked around. On his bed were 3 items that he had never owned: a bandana, the shell of a ghost, and an armband with the assassin logo on it. Below a note, remember, being all that it said. He looked at his consoles, his PS4 running the whole night before. He turned the power off and turned off his TV. He then proceeded to call Tim and gave him the biggest Merry Christmas of his life.
So, I gotta say, Grant, that story made me think of the scene in Dumb and Dumber when Jeff Daniels is like, you know, Harry, just when I think that you couldn't get any lower, you go and do something like this and completely redeem yourself. That was, well, I mean, you write a fucking story about video games, you got me anyway, but just hearing that, like, Solid Snake was the Ghost of Christmas Past was
I'm
perfect.
amazed he wasn't.
Absolutely perfect.
Yeah. I thought the box idea was pretty clever, if I do say so myself.
Not to toot your own horn, but
Yeah, you know.
Not to toot my own horn, but toot toot.
I'm glad you guys liked it.
still surprised he wasn't all the ghosts.
Well, I'm gonna say I would have had iterations of one or the other, basically, if I wanted to.
All right, so that's 2 stories down and 2 to go. Up next we have Debbie.
Debbie!
Alrighty. So, my story is one that will later be posted to my blog. They're characters that I've used before under my pen name, Maeve LaFay. So, most of my stuff is written under that name.
And after this is all over and I'm like redoing the YouTube notes and whatnot, I'll put links for people to be able to go read your stuff if they're interested.
Alrighty, awesome. And other than that, it takes place in a fictional world, and it is not necessarily any real world holiday because of that. It is called the Festival of Dragon Star. Snow piled up outside as Naya watched from the window, curled up in a chair by the hearth of the one-story stone cabin. Eglason yawned from the windowsill, his white wings and long neck folded around him, the baby ice dragon absorbing the cold coming through the glass. Naya wondered where Severin was. The lighting of the tree would be soon, if the snows let up at least. She hoped that he was all right, and stood to look out the window once more, gently pat Eglason's tiny head. Eglason chirped happily as she rubbed his snout, seemingly unaware of Severin's arduous journey. He should have been back by now, but the silhouette moved through. But no silhouette moved through the blowing snow. Deep winter could be brutal, but the appearance of the red dragon star tonight would prove the end of the dark, frozen nights of deep winter. Their feast this year was to be inside the keep that lay just outside the grouping of stone cottages, but Naya had decorated the inside of the stone cottage and prepared a pot of soup over the fire, knowing that the weather was not likely to let up. A cold gust of wind shook the roof of the cottage, and the howling grew louder, making Naya wonder about the being supporting the roof. Eglason would have no problem if they were to lose their roof. The ice dragon would take to the sky and fly through the thickest blizzard without losing his sense of direction, but Naya would probably die of the cold, and Eglason was not quite old enough to fend for himself. The thought brought concern back to the forefront of her mind for Severin. He had set out in the hour of daylight that they had, and had now been gone for hours in the bitter cold with no food or hope of producing heat. A fire would not stay lit in this blizzard. She gathered her cloak about her shoulders and waved her hand over the ornate head of her white staff, casting a blue-silver wisp of light within the hollow head. She fastened her thick blue cloak around her shoulders and wrapped a woolen scarf around her neck. And my thing doesn't want to scroll down. There we go.
This sounds familiar.
Yes, it does.
I'll return soon. She spoke to the dragon, scratching behind his ears. Naya set out into the snow, feeling the ice and snowflakes blast against her, freezing her exposed hands and what unfortunate flesh lay exposed on her face. She found that even with the magic fairy light, that it was hard to see past the deep darkness and swirling snows. The cold bit at her skin as the wind cut through her bones, nearly knocking her several times. She didn't know how long she was out before she was forced to turn back. The cold was too brutal, and she might have been lost had she pressed on, and died in the cold. She huffed and heaved, fighting her way in the wind and darkness, her silver blue wisp shining as a beacon in the blinding dark. If she could find her way back to their cottage, she could save her numb extremities that barely tingled with feeling. She fancied that beneath her mittens her fingers had turned blue or purple. She had nearly given up on her journey to rediscover their cottage when she found the corner of the stone foundation in the light of her staff. Naya felt along the walls, rounding the corner, and knocked along the surfaces, listening for the sound of wood over the howling wind. She found the door by the pale light and pushed through the entrance. Bursting through the door, Naya fell onto the wooden floor and wind pushing her inwards. She scrambled upwards and shut the door, blocking the cruel cold, I'm not used to reading aloud, from entering further into one-room stone cottage. There was a happy chirp directly beside her, and Eglason climbed up onto her shoulders, rubbing his muzzle happily against her cheek. Naya shivered as the icy scales chilled her further. Sensing this, Eglason flew away back to the windowsill. Naya wiped the stubborn flakes from her eyelashes and moved toward the fire when she found him sitting by the fire in the armchair, reading the same book Naya had been so engrossed in earlier that night. Stubborn? She choked, throwing her arms around his neck. Thank the gods! I thought you were dead. Severin rose from the chair and returned the hug and pointed past her. Naya turned to see an old man clad in a green robe with a crown of holly holding a golden staff stroking his long white beard. I bade you holiday tidings, said the old man. This is Neanthriel, and he saw me into his home when dusk settled. Severin said with a smile. Once I was warmed and fed, I was brought here. Naya sat herself by the fire, allowing feeling to return to her limbs, listening to the crackling as she cast out a thick spell to dry off the melted snow. Eglason flew back to Naya, coiling around her shoulders, happy to be near her once again. Severin and Naya gathered around Neanthriel and he placed a hand on either of their shoulders. There was a quick pop. Naya looked around and found herself in a great hall filled with people, men, women, and children, sitting amidst of beautiful music. The hall had been decked with wreaths of holly and various kinds. A man sat at the head of the table wearing a golden circlet, holding a chalice of silver. Everyone stopped speaking and gave the Lord their undivided attention. Neanthriel walked slowly up to him, and the two men embraced. Welcome to the Dragonstar Festival, the Lord called. The wizard Neanthriel has come to light our tree, but unfortunately Look! A child cried, pointing as the clock just chimed midnight. The snow stopped. Many crowded to the windows, amazed to see the sudden ceasing of the snow. And above the tree shone a bright red star gleaming in the black sky. The crowd filed out into the great hall and into a courtyard, each person grabbing a single candle on a golden saucer. Naya watched in amazement as everyone, man, woman, and child, lord, lady, and peasant, formed three united rings around the towering wayward pine and began to sing the familiar old carol. The bright red star shone brighter and brighter as the bright red waned in intensity and color, until it shone the same bright silver as Eglason's wings. The baby dragon watched from around Naya's neck with intense wonder, chirping at the falling star as if it were a dear friend. Neanthriel spoke loudly in an ancient tongue that Naya could not understand. Over the carolers, sprites flew around the tree, spiraling around its casting orbs in fairy light, blues, greens, and silvers, gold, red, emitting warmth in the cold. The singing from men, elves, and other unseen fairies heralded in the falling of the dragon star and the first morning dawning for over 4 moons. Walking back into the small cottage that they had rented for the duration of the festival during the high noon had been the greatest gift Naya had ever seen, for she had forgotten what the sun on her skin had felt like. And that is it.
Very good.
You know what I liked about that way more than our Christmas?
Hmm.
Dragons.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Dragons are always
You
good.
never know how hard to pronounce some of those names are until you're forced to read them aloud. I made those names up and I couldn't pronounce them.
Yeah, that's always been one of the rules I've had. It's like, if I can't pronounce it, I don't know if I should write it in. But in the same, that's let's be honest, Anagon, because everybody's gonna get that right the first time.
Yeah, my names were supposed to have a very Tolkienian feel.
Could tell, but it's one, that's what's in. Two, it still works really well. So, good job.
Thank you.
Alright, so that's 3 down, so that just leaves 1 more.
Great, the worst for last.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, you're awful.
It's a rough burden.
Yeah,
But, you know,
Have to.
I think we're stuck, guys.
Alright,
Well, it was a
so,
great run.
I got a surprise for you guys.
Oh boy.
So, at the onset of writing this story, I had set up the Facebook page for 2 Pages podcast and whatnot, and I'd said that this was like the grossest story that I've ever written, or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, at the Facebook page, also, we want to have exactly what you wrote.
Nah, I'm fine with
Paragraph.
paraphrasing myself.
Okay.
But here's the thing: it is, but it's not. You guys get to choose your own adventure.
Oh.
One of these?
Yeah. I can't say that I'm going to do this every single podcast, but writing a choose your own adventure story has been something that I've always wanted to try. So,
It's also really hard.
yeah, I've been actually honestly working on this thing the whole month. Just trying to figure out how everything would fit together and how I could, where these would split and how the fuck you make a choose your own adventure story out of 2 pages.
Right.
Not easy. But
No.
here we go. This is all about Spacemas.
Baseness.
Love it.
Once upon a time, there was a time we weren't yet upon. The year was 25XDX, and the residents of the city of Futureton were getting ready for Spacemas, an annual holiday tradition that celebrates the day we were visited by aliens, ushering in a new age of enlightenment for the solar system. And no, I don't mean like weekly world news style, like aliens meet the president, get drunk, and crash their ship in the White House type of meeting or whatever. This was an actual miracle. The first real public documentation of interstellar communication. The cool thing about Spacemas, unlike those ancient religious ceremonies, is that Spacemas it happened in the digital age, so we can prove that it actually happened. Lots of people took pictures and videos, and you can easily find them all on the internet. The few people who denied that Spacemas happened get put on a rocket and get sent into space. And no, I don't mean they get put in the rocket. They get strapped to it like they're the mermaid statue on the front of a boat. Serves them right, ignorant fucks. No, I'm just kidding. They wouldn't learn anything if they died within seconds. A lifetime of exile in space is more than enough punishment. So, while everyone believed in Spacemas, not everyone enjoyed celebrating the holiday. Those people are pretty lame, though. I mean, who doesn't like lasers? That's right. For Spacemas, people decorate their houses in fucking lasers that play guitar solos and stuff. But I mean, it's like any holiday, you know, there's gonna be some people that are against it. Maybe they should stop being so uptight and plant a tree on Arbor Day or something. But yeah, some people just didn't like Spacemas. If they did, this story wouldn't have much of a plot to it, other than a mass exodus of people on rocket ships. Actually, that sounds kind of neat. So, here's the first choice. Would you guys like to hear about the exile, or would you like to hear about Spacemas in Futureton?
Ugh.
I always
I figured
die.
out a good way for everybody to vote. Alright, how I have everybody on the bottom here is Chris, Grant, Debbie, Tom. Chris.
Exile.
Grant.
Exile.
Debbie.
Exile.
And Tom, you're outvoted anyway, so...
I would have said exile.
Sorry, friend.
Alright, so spaceships were being sent to every solar system in the galaxy to spread word of Spacemas throughout the universe. Even though near light speed travel through space was achieved by Earth's scientists, it still took a long time to reach different solar systems. To pass the time, some people were put into time capsules until the time that they were supposed to reach their respective planets. Unfortunately, the first fleet of rocket ships that were sent out didn't have cryogenic chambers to freeze people and sustain their lives for hundreds of years. A mistake was made in the ship's initial blueprints, and the chambers that were installed were basically just airtight containers with time-release locks on them. The rotting smell of corpses caused the extinction of 3 different planets. Not just a species on said planets, but like the whole planet itself died.
Oh, good God.
One of them was due to the introduction of a foreign species. The smell from one spaceship was so bad that it made a planet say, "Fuck this," and jump right into the sun. Another was already being teased by the rest of the solar system for being the smelly one, so it went out of orbit and was never seen again. But sometimes, when you look out into space, you can almost hear the sound of the rogue planet weeping in the night. Inhabitants of worlds unknown to us all across the universe would find the wreckage of crashed spaceships, open the mysterious containers to find the rancid remains of people long dead and decayed, and vow revenge on the Earth after breathing in a stench so putrid it made whoever smelled it immediately rip off their nose and bleed to death, as it was a much preferable option.
And thus war was solved.
Unfortunately, one of the ships landed on a planet with inhabitants who don't have noses. And they
Maybe
sent
not.
their fiercest captain, Lord Dick, the Dick Lord, on a spaceship to retaliate. But that's potentially a story for another day. I don't know, I mean, I just write the stories. You get to make the choices. So, now, you have your choice of the revenge of Lord Dick, the Dick Lord, or the story about the sad planet. Chris.
For the love of God, the sad planet.
Grant.
I'm going to go with the revenge.
Debbie.
Vengeance!
And Tom.
Revenge.
This is a sad, sad world.
Congratulations. You guys picked the gross ending.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. After my story last time, I saw how much Chris walked away. This is your warning now that you might not want to be around for this one.
Brilliant.
Or you could just mute for a while.
It was a clear, calm night in space, like every night in space. What, you expected some bad weather or something? Come on, it's space. Alright, fine, it was a fucking dark and stormy space night. Plasma clouds were raining ions as a wormhole appeared in the distance, with a giant ship emerging from it. It looked kind of like if the Enterprise was a big dick and balls. Fire the pre-ejaculator! Shouted Lord Dick, the Dick Lord, and commander of this ship. Suddenly, an almost clear laser beam shot through the night sky and struck the hull of a military space station orbiting the Earth, blowing a giant hole in the side and sending crew members and supplies out into space. And there were probably like flashing red lights and those military-style alarms too. I think they call them klaxons. Anyway. What the hell was that? Shouted Commander William Saw, nicknamed Buzz. He was a brilliant military strategist and quickly gained command of the space station, of which I couldn't think of a cool name for. A monitor showed a hole in the hull, revealing that the station had been hid in the engine room/kitchen. It may seem like an odd design scheme, but it made it easier to power the kitchen's microwaves and other appliances. Get the repair crew down there to fix that hole, stat! Yelled Commander Saw. We don't want to lose any more valuable supplies out of that hole, and damn it, there goes my favorite coffee mug. He really liked that mug. It was given to him by his grandson, who had the mug specially made with a picture he drew on the side of it. Granted, the picture kind of looked like shit, but it was the thought that counted. Damn it, Dick Lord! How many times must we do this? Saw yelled, as Dick Lord cackled. We may have had dozens of encounters in the unwritten past, but I can assure you that this is the last time. From hell's cock I stab at thee. Dick Lord's ship began to charge its laser cannon. A slender cylinder began to move its way back and forth along the ship, slowly at first and increasing in speed. I know that sounds kind of suggestive, but that's just how they charge up static electricity in space. As the laser charged, energy flowed through tubes to the front of the ship, looking like big blue dick veins. Was this really a design choice? After what seemed like 15 minutes, but was really only like 2, a milky white laser shot out in spurts and hit the space station, destroying it completely. I won? Dick Lord asked in surprise. I won! Well, that was exhausting. I'm going to take a nap. And curled up in his captain's chair, wrapping himself in the emergency snuggie he kept under the chair. The end.
But the important question is, did he have a cigarette?
I don't think Dick Lord is a smoker.
No, he strikes me as a smoker.
I don't know about that one. I mean...
Oh, Jesus. Troy wins again.
And still champion.
That one is hard to top with that kind of dedication and commitment.
No.
Yeah.
Oh. Good job, Troy.
The funny thing is, when you said like a ship shaped like that, all I pictured was that thing in Grand Theft Auto, like the newer games, where they've got like a Republican space rangers, and all their spaceships are basically shaped like giant dicks.
So yeah, I'm not really sure what to do now because like I don't know. I kind of want to present the rest of the story, but I'm not sure how to do it. Um, so I'm gonna think about a couple different options, and if anybody has any ideas, like, let me know.
When in doubt, just insert another phallus as a transition.
Well, like I said, you guys picked the dirty one. The other ones are a lot tamer in comparison. Like a lot tamer.
Chris is wishing that we were a lot tamer in life.
Yeah, you probably would have enjoyed the Sad Planet story.
I guess really you could just like do another, like just do it as. I guess you could just like release the alternate story as just like a 2 pages of stupidity or something.
Can we not talk about releasing after hearing that story?
I walked into that one.
Yeah, you kind of did.
And now I'm getting awful mental images. So on that note, I think we're just about done here, folks. Thanks for tuning into another episode of the Two Pages podcast, and we'll be back in another month. Not sure who will be with me, but somebody will, hopefully, unless I've disgusted
figure it
you
out.
all. Have a good night, folks.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.